welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn. I am your host, Michael Grace, and today I am joined by Natalie Ruiz. She is the CEO of AnswerConnect. Natalie began her career as a temporary employee and often says her path to success has been unconventional. Natalie is an award-winning executive who's been recognized with awards for Female Executive of the Year, for Women Helping Women by the Stevie Award Association, and a Women of Influence by the Portland Business Journal. Natalie, thanks for taking the time and joining us on the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me, Michael.
Awesome. That's an incredible rise, right? From a temporary employee, I guess, that I don't want to say that's the bottom, right? But that's definitely entry level for sure.
About as entry as you can be. Yeah.
Yeah. all the way. You're not even really there. You're just kind of temporary.
Yeah. You don't have a desk. They aren't going to print you a badge yet. They're testing the waters with you.
That's awesome. And then to go all the way to a CEO position, tell us a little bit about that story. Like, was it your drive? Was it your passion to want to be at the top? Were you just a natural born leader? How did that happen?
I'd love to say yes, yes, and yes, but that doesn't tell even half of the story. I got really lucky in that I found a company that was growing and had a founder and a really kind of early green startup mentality leadership team that was open to listening to voices even from a temporary employee. And so when I found the company, it was literally just a job. I was a temp in effectively a contact center that provided answering service and support for small business. And that wasn't the dream. I didn't even actually know what that was. I really did. I remember my interview, I came in and said, "So why outsourced telecom?" And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't even know what that is. So I got into it thinking paycheck on Friday, schedule that works, just the basics. And even with that early on, there were some things that were red flags for me. There wasn't onboarding. It was very much a startup. And I, as a young, kind of inexperienced worker, thought that bosses had it all figured out or they knew what they were doing. And they didn't. And so I started to think, yet again, here's a company that isn't going to work out. I'm just going to be here until I find the next thing. And then I had a chance encounter with the founder of the company. He asked me how things were going. And for some reason, instead of doing the thing that I typically would do, which was like, hey, it's going great. Thanks for the opportunity, etc., I told him the truth. And I let him know that I didn't think it was for me. And to his credit, we got into a conversation where he really listened and he asked for me to help change some of those things. And my perspective thus far had been really onboarding and the fact that I didn't have a desk or a spot and didn't exactly know what the company was doing. So through that lens, I saw change in those things with the very next new hire. And I was addicted from that point on. So the growth was really organic in following curiosity, deciding that I wanted to speak up on different things that could be better or see where I could improve. And that led me around the organization. As the org grew, I also got to grow. And I really think that the promotion to CEO, I mean, certainly there's a lot that went into that, but it was also kind of like the all access pass to just keep working to improve things, to kind of keep bugging people, because we kept changing my title to kind of encompass whatever it was that I wanted to improve. And finally it was like, okay, I think we have the title for you.
I love that, right? So many people, I love so much of what you said, because you kind of said so many people in passing, when they have that rare opportunity to say something, right? See something, say something. And I know that's a kind of a related to our current situation in the world, but it also as a professional, right? Like, people complain and they go out to Glassdoor and they do all this stuff. And I always tell my employees, like, wow, why don't you just say something, right? Why don't you
Right.
just ask for 15 minutes with your boss or your boss's boss or somebody and say, hey, I just have some observations I want you to be aware of, in a non-threatening way. And you're going to be, well, unless you work for, somebody who's not a great leader, but generally you're going to find leadership going, wow, that's awesome. And they have no idea, truly. They're totally, not totally clueless, but but oftentimes, especially those companies that have all these layers, right? They don't see what happens at the tactical
Yeah.
level.
It's I've learned now, and in hindsight I can see how true that is. As a leader, and the more you become a leader of leaders, or a leader who is
Hmm.
planning strategy or big moves, the less you get to walk the floor, the less you get to know
Yeah.
what's happening with these really impactful thing aspects. The other thing that I've learned is that it's one thing to speak up, and that in itself is a skill. Use your voice, have the psychological safety, have a leader who will hear you, etc. And it's even like the next layer of that is being able to make an impact. So not just escalating problems, but being willing to help fix some of them. And I
Hmm.
found a lot of those opportunities here. And that was one, just a function of being small and really green as a company. Like, we were so small and so fresh that everybody had to wear a lot of different hats. And that afforded a lot of opportunities to actually get into it and solve that problem.
Yeah. I mean, instead of saying, oh, there's no policy around this, policies you can kind of Google now, right? You can be out, oh,
Right.
what,
Yeah.
there's PDFs of what everybody's doing, and then you can
Hmm.
kind of take that. And I love employees that take that initiative and have that drive, right? I just did a presentation where I said, the title of the presentation, I've said it in the last couple of podcasts, so I'll say it again. If Apple censors me, well, then Apple censors me. But the title of the talk was "Fuck Average, Be Legendary," right? And part of that is take initiative, be
Hmm.
noticed, right? Do something different. Don't just say, "Oh, everything's going great." I love your story where you actually said, "Well, here's an opportunity for me to share the truth, and maybe it'll make a difference." And it did for you personally, and also for the company.
Right.
It had a dual benefit.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm really grateful. And that same sentiment, that same vibe, that culture has remained true to us for all of these years.
That's awesome. So, Answer Connect, talk to me a little bit just so that the listeners understand what Answer Connect is. And you used a word that even I don't know. I'm where you were when you took the job. Outsourced telecom.
Right.
What exactly is that?
Okay, so that's the fancy and at the time super scary term, right? Like, what in the world is that? Really, what it means, it's this thing that is not that cool and not that sexy, but so impactful. When you go to call your dentist, do you know that oftentimes you aren't speaking to somebody who's actually in that office? You're talking to somebody who is in front of a computer, who has all of the information for that dental office and can help make an appointment, answer questions, triage an emergency to the dental group. But making certain that they don't miss any phone calls after hours, on weekends, etc. So it is an answering service, a virtual reception, virtual assistant, or outsourced telecom. And so Answer Connect has been around since the early 2000s. And we've been helping small and mid-sized businesses in this way through all verticals. And it's really an extension of an office. It helps them scale. And for a lot of these small businesses, you can boil it down and think about, what is the value of one phone call? What is the value of one new client, one new patient, one new customer? And in this day and age, what happens if you don't answer, if it goes to voicemail, or if you reach somebody who's multitasking and doesn't give you a great experience? Well, you Google and you go to the next result, and you've
To
lost
call
out
your
on that.
competitor. Yeah.
Right. So we do this 24/7, 365, and the world keeps changing. But what I can see is
Mhm.
that we still crave human connection when we want that shortest distance. If you can't do self service, then you want a really high touch person to be able to help you. And that's where we come in.
I love it. A lot of the work that we do is in artificial intelligence, and we use a lot of chatbots, and we use a
Hmm.
lot of um, high end technology, and we think,
Hmm.
man, we just made this a great experience. And then oftentimes, what we find is the people that go through that journey are like, I just want to talk to a person,
Yeah.
and we're like, ah, yeah, we don't, we got nothing on a person,
Yeah.
but we got bots. You can talk to
We are,
automation.
Mike, we are real people, not bots. And like I said, I think there's a place for AI as a foundation to help real people do a better job, but you can't replace the nuance. You shouldn't try to replace that human connection with AI. It, that's where we come in.
there's been a lot of people that have tried to change, this industry, right? Whether it be, um, what you guys do, which is really cool, so that all the calls get answered. Whether it's, so many times, I just have a picture in my head of, oh, it's 4:59, click, and they click, auto forward, and it goes to
Hmm.
voicemail, and somebody's like 5 o'clock trying to call to get, a service, and it just goes to voicemail, and they just get so, I mean, visibly, like, just let down because of
Right.
that. And what a difference it would be if somebody actually picked up at 5:02 on a Friday and said, "Hey, thanks for calling Dr. So and so. I'd love to help you." Um,
Absolutely.
I mean, just night and day, that experience, right? Your physical posture just changed hearing the difference in those stories. Um, and so many people have entered this space, right? Trying to put in chatbots, and maybe people want to talk to a little bubble in the corner of their screen, or maybe, people want a robot to call them. And Google did a great commercial a while ago where a bot made a reservation at a restaurant, right?
Terrifying. It's
And
so terrifying to me.
and they were like, which one's the bot? The person making the call or the person receiving the call? And I was like, I love virtual assistants. I love all this tech. And I'm like, I don't, that just kind of frightens me too. I'm like, we're
Well,
taking the human out of this relationship.
exactly. And just because you theoretically can do something, I think you have to think about the implications. And should you? The other thing is a virtual assistant, I call a credit card or something like this, and they'll walk you through, and the voice recognition is pretty good. And that's all well and fine until it's not. And then I think my blood pressure spikes much higher than it would if it was a human who said, "Oh, give me 1 second. I went to the wrong screen." I still have that human connection where I'm like, yeah, not a big deal. But we've all experienced that, trying to overly enunciate our words to the voice recognition bot to try to get where we want to go. And it's like, oh my gosh, let me talk to a human. And I think that's the key. Self service is prevalent. We're all living and working in different ways. We carry around really smart computers in our pocket for everything we do. But when you want a human, when you want to talk to a person, you want that to be an actual real person. And
Mhm.
we offer chat with real humans because also if I'm chatting on a website, I'm okay if it pops up and says, here's an FAQ. Let's see if that helps you. But if I think I'm chatting with a person and I get a few sentences in and I realize that it is a bot and it actually isn't going to be able to help me, yet again, I'm super frustrated and I have to switch channels now to get my problem solved, which is another annoyance.
And there's usually not a good handoff there either.
Right.
When
Yeah.
when you're trying to go from that AI to human handoff. I tell a lot of CHROs who we get an opportunity to help solve complex problems, and they outsource lots of functions, which takes the human connection kind of out of it.
Hmm.
And they tell me, we care about our employees, we care so deeply, and then they'll take functions like leave management, and they'll outsource it to some company.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I'm not going to let you tell me you care about your employees if you outsource critical activities that are really meaningful, right? People don't go on leave. If people are going on leave, maybe it's a planned leave like a pregnancy, and congratulations, and that's great. But oftentimes it's a death of a family member, or it's a tragic event when somebody
Hmm.
needs that, and there's no human there, right? Or there's no
Hmm.
human that's compassionate or empathetic, and the experience is just horrible.
Well,
Um,
you miss things. You just
yeah.
miss things. And we know, I think it's fair to say that there's so much unconscious bias that's written into software as well.
Hmm.
And so, and the software, even if it's extremely well written and they've tried to control for this, they're not you. They're not your org. They don't know the people. They don't even really know your policies. You can just write them in. And I can think of countless times when I was so happy to be in a conversation with the leaders in my HR team when we're talking about a really difficult employee situation where we get to do something that's maybe outside of the policy. We maybe get to make an exception or reconsider if that policy makes sense anymore. And if you automate it and you totally outsource it or you let a piece of software make the decisions for you, you miss out on that.
I love it. I know we're on a little tangent talking about outsourced telecom, and we could probably geek out about outsourced telecom for a
Probably.
while. Um, so going back to kind of your journey, because folks will
Hmm.
be interested in that. How long did it take you to go, from being a temp to the CEO?
It was 9 years. So a
Wow,
9 year overnight success.
there we go. That's still quick.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I would say is the CEO that I was in 2015 when that happened is a very different CEO than I am now. I mean, the learning continues, the understanding continues, the growth continues. It can never stop. And, I'm excited to see who I'll be in another 5 or 10 years as a leader.
That's very awesome, right? Leaders that grow, leaders that consume knowledge, leaders that give back through podcasts like this, sharing their experience to hopefully inspire others. Lots of focus on glass ceilings and women getting
Mm.
to the top and opportunities for women. I was telling somebody, I said, when do we know that we've fixed it, right? Because it seems like now there's almost like this big tilt towards that, which is not true, right? The stats will prove that it's not true in compensation. It's not true in promotions and such.
Hmm.
Um, it- how, like, do you see that changing for just women in general? Like that they're actually getting a fair shot to have a journey like yours, that they're getting the opportunities that they deserve, or is it
Uh,
still
so,
very
so if I could have been born at any time in history and in any place in the world, I'm super fortunate that it's now and it's here. So I'll say that. So in a lot of ways, things have improved. You can go back through time. You can look in other cultures,
Mhm.
other countries. Like I'm very, very fortunate. But we have so far to go. We have so far to go with the wage gap. We have so far to go with representation. We have so far
Yeah.
to go. And so certainly somebody could say, yeah, I'm tired of hearing about it, or this is this huge push. When it's 50-50 representation, and it's not even about 50-50 because it's not just gender. There are all of these folks who've been historically excluded or underrepresented. And when you think about companies that get to make decisions and get to make, therefore, an impact on our society, whether it is in the tech that they build or our educational system or politics or whatever it is, why shouldn't we have leaders who are representative of our population?
Yeah.
That is how the best decisions are going to get made. If there are multiple voices in the room representing various backgrounds and interests who are safe enough to speak up, that's how you get the best ideas. And so I do think that there are more folks who are telling their stories. There has been a surge of, with remote work, the stats have shown that there are more women CEOs of remote companies. And I'm also a mom. I take on, household duties, caretaking duties. I have to tell you, if I had to commute for 2 hours a day, put on heels and a suit and sit in an office, it just becomes exponentially harder and potentially impossible to do this. So there are some wins, but then you throw in a pandemic. You throw in a childcare crisis. You throw in where I was at last year with kids at home trying to do school through Zoom, and those inequities become really glaring. And there was a huge setback specifically for women in the workforce who had to make the decision to leave the workforce because they had those other household and caretaking duties at a disproportionate rate to men.
I Yeah, that I hadn't thought about that, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. So I'm just making a note for myself. I mean, because I mean, that was just so insightful. Because you're right. Again, being in the tech field, we always we welcome, we want, we support all the initiatives to get especially like young girls into tech, and some of the ones that join are by far the most brightest, right? They're by far the most just intrigued by tech, and they're if you look at like who's leading AI, who's leading the field of robotics and such, there's lots of women in those fields finally. But that was so much effort to get women into science
Hmm.
and tech. um, and I think you're right. Like there still seems to be an absence at the top levels of the appropriate amount of both minorities and women, right? That are representing the companies. Um, when you look at your journey, what was one of the biggest risks that you ever took,
Mm.
and talk a little bit about that.
Hmm. Well, I can think of a variety of risks. I'll talk, I guess, quickly on a personal level. I think one of the biggest personal risks that I've taken career wise, it's not a specific decision or event, but deciding to show up authentically
Mm,
and stay true to what I believe. There's so much pressure to shrink to fit, to change, to maybe dilute some of these things. And you're on kind of tenuous ground as well when you're an underrepresented person. And the last thing some people want to hear is like, well, we've got to be more equitable and we have to do these super hard things and we need to turn
yeah,
this on its head. Um, Having the privilege to be a leader in an organization, and we talked about what we do, it seems pretty routine in some ways, maybe on the surface. But when you think about specific decisions of where we'll hire from, what types of businesses we'll partner with, and which ones we won't, making very specific decisions that keep us true to our culture, our core values, and our mission, I think has been one of the biggest risks, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And now I've been through it enough times where I feel very confident in making those decisions. But there were certainly times where I thought, oh, great, I'm going on record. I'm super passionate about this. It's unpopular and it's kind of wacky. It might not even drive, bottom line revenue or top line revenue, but I believe that it's the right thing to do. And those are the types of big risks that I've taken. And luckily, most of them have worked out.
I love it. I mean, I think so many people want to conform, right? They want to be part of the norm, right? That
Hmm.
they truly conform and give up core values. They lose pieces of themselves in their journey, and they don't stand out, right? And then when they do get an opportunity, they don't know how to capitalize on that. They don't know where to come from. They don't know what they believe anymore. Or they're telling somebody else's story or what they heard or what they read. I mean, I purposely kind of shut down my inputs around the news and especially
Hmm.
like politics and such because I, I really want to form my own opinions and come from my own genuine position.
Hmm.
And a lot of what I do, what I put out in the podcast, is always authentic to me and sometimes very controversial.
Hmm.
Some people might be like, "Oh, outsourced telecom is so controversial." I highly doubt that, but which is different than telemarketing. So anybody who's
Yes,
raging over people calling them randomly,
it's
this is
that's not
not
us.
what Natalie
No.
does. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for that clarification. Yeah, I think there's so much to it. It's kind of building a muscle of authenticity. It's building a muscle of knowing
I
what
love that.
your North Star is. And at some point, if you allow the little things that you're like, oh, I don't feel great about that, but maybe I'm going to do it, you pretty rapidly come out of alignment. You come out of alignment with what even makes sense. And as a leader, I've seen the value of being true, of being vulnerable, of admitting when I make a mistake. Also, calling out, I can think of a big risk that we took as an organization, which was becoming a remote first company many, many years ago. We started that transition back in 2007. So that was
Wow.
very early for us. That was wild. That was wacky. There were a lot of naysayers and there were a lot of bumps to work through. And I truly believe that it would not have worked. It would not have been a success for us if we didn't have an environment where people could speak up about what wasn't working. And if we didn't have an environment where somebody could say, yeah, I don't like this software that we're trying that takes a snapshot of me every 2 minutes. Like, that's super weird. Or I don't like that Michael hasn't been at his desk all day. Like, what are the expectations? Or, whatever that is, that helped us to iterate and to come up with some policies, procedures, guidelines that worked for us. And I think that's core. When you are going to take risks, you need to have an environment where people can disagree, or they can say, hey, you're missing something, or you're forgetting something really important. And that's, again, how you get stronger ideas.
I love it. I always tell people like, leading the strategic services arm of our firm that I lead, it is okay to disagree with me, right? It's okay to be
Hmm.
like, hey, I don't think we should do this, and we can have a robust, sometimes elevated discussion. Um, and I want everyone to feel heard. And at the end of
Hmm.
the day, right, as a leader, there's going to come a point where we're going to have to make a decision. And I tell
Sure.
people I'm totally good with all the discussion and discord, as long as at the end of the day, when we pick a decision, it might not be the decision that you particularly supported, but you have to get
Hmm.
behind it, right? You can't be an obstacle to that moving forward after we've let everybody be heard and everybody's participated.
Yeah.
I love it.
I think you can get there when everybody does feel heard. And ideally, you get to, somebody gets to make the decision and you move forward. You don't always get to consensus, and
Hmm.
that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're constantly learning as a CEO. We talked a little bit about that.
Hmm.
How do you do that, right? We talked about walking the floor
Hmm.
as a remote company. That's almost physically impossible. Hi, I'm here at your house. I'm gonna walk
We
in
do
now.
it. I have to tell you, we pop it. We do video calls. We shadow. I sit on conference calls. I join team meetings. I've got office hours where anybody in the company can connect with me, and they do.
So
So,
awesome.
virtual, there can be a lot of connection. In fact, with one click, I can connect with folks who are 10,000 miles away. And that would never happen in a physical office. But you do have to be intentional, and you have to remind people, and you have to tell them that it's really important, because there's all of these barriers of, well, I know you're busy. Well, everyone's busy. This is actually my job. So building that in intentionally has been a huge way to stay connected to what's happening, to know who's available, and to try to kind of pay forward. I'll never forget that first conversation with the founder of the company. I had a chance to speak up and do so in a very honest way, and it made a difference for me. And it's important to me to extend that to as many people as I can, because you never know who else
Yeah.
is a temp who's coming in, who is thinking, oh, geez, where did I land? I've got to get out of here. And maybe they actually have a lot to offer.
So many times, right? I've worked at really large, some of the largest healthcare companies in the U.S., and I've had an opportunity to work on those leadership teams as a leader. And I always used to remind our C level, it's important to remember, that there's somebody at their beginning of their career down there that you're just like awe-inspiring to them. Like they don't understand the context that you're at and how to
Hmm.
get there, and to take a moment and just to visit them, or to give them a forum, or to show that, hey, you out of thousands, I'm talking to you. What do you think?
Hmm.
Um, is transformational, much like your story. It can really inspire somebody and change their life. I mean, in a really meaningful way. It's
Yeah.
so
And
cool.
so it's, I think, just as rewarding for me as it is for them. And
Hmm.
that is the work. It's at least a big part of the work. The other aspect of learning, so we're big on learning. I didn't graduate college. That used to be something that I was very ashamed of, or I had all these feelings about. I will still advocate that, my kids go to college, but I didn't. That wasn't the path. We have a paid learning benefit for all of our employees. We've built online kind of crowdsourced universities. You can learn anything you want, and you've got time every single day, 30 minutes a day, where you can do that. Our core values are learning, sharing, and giving back. And so we're constantly not only learning, but then discussing with each other what we're learning. And that was a fledgling habit long ago. And it clicked for me the first time that myself and a couple of other leaders had read the same book. And I think the book was about customer experience or something. And we were dealing with a difficult situation that was impacting a client. And in the conversation where we were trying to figure out what to do, we all inadvertently used language from this book. And I realized that that had become the foundation. That was now the floor. That learning had helped us level up. And so we're doing that widespread. I think it's one of our competitive advantages. And also, it promotes a lot of internal growth, a lot of internal promotions, a lot of employee engagement. And for me, I'm doing more than the 30 minutes a day because I'm enjoying, audiobooks have been a game changer for me. I'm such like a senior citizen in my life. My kids are like, can you please put on music? I'm like, I mean, maybe after this chapter, but I get to have the voices of pros and experts and people who are helping me think differently in my ear every day. And that has been a game changer in every aspect of my life.
I love it. I tell people that if you're working at a company and you're like listening to these podcasts, right, where we have just amazing entrepreneurs and amazing leaders and great companies, and you're like, my company doesn't have my company, then go work for a different company, right? Like, stop being a whiner. Go find a company that does these types of programs that actually
Mm-hmm.
visit. It's great to say, I care about my employees and have no programs or no interest. Like, we do Headspace, we do all these cool things. We do Peloton programs for mind, body. And, if you're at a company that doesn't truly invest in their employees tangibly, like through proven programs
Mm-hmm.
like this, 30 minutes a day across a company, that equates to a lot of potentially
It's an
lost
investment.
productivity,
Yeah.
right? There
Mm-hmm.
is a cost to that in addition to the technical program that you have to
Mm-hmm.
actually pay for and provide to the employees. So go find a company that does invest. They're out there. They're amazing. Um,
Well, and work has changed. We're not just all going and punching in at the factory for the rest of our
yeah.
lives. And there's this concept of work life balance that I completely reject. And thank you, you haven't asked me about it, but it comes up a lot. And so I think about this because the inherent idea of that is that when you're at work, you're not living. Like, that's not your life. You're just like doing this thing for 40 or 50 hours a week so that you can live on the weekends. And I reject that. Our lives are really, really finite. And we're going to spend 30% of them working. I want to do something that matters. I want to do something that makes an impact. I want to do it with people I like and enjoy. And that's not just something that a person with a cool title like me should have get afforded. That is the way work should be. So I'm with you. If somebody's at a company and we've all had crappy jobs, we've all been there where we just have to do the thing to get the paycheck on Friday, but invest in yourself in the off time so that you can do something else soon.
Yeah. I love it. I mean, just technology has changed. Before, when you wanted to learn something, it was very traditional and you had to go get a book, or you had to take a class, and it was very
Mhm.
formal, and you had to drive to your community college or somewhere,
Mhm.
right? um, Now education is instant, right? It's everywhere. It's omnipresent. You can do a Google search. It's inexpensive relatively.
Sure.
You can get access for it. Companies are fully supportive of it. For the most part, I mean, there are some terrible companies out there, but most companies, want to invest in their employees because it
Mhm.
raises their employees' skill set, makes them more valuable to both themselves and to the employer. It's kind of this win-win swirl that's really came about with the advent of technology, probably in the last 7 to 10 years. I'd say it's really started to happen. That's awesome that you guys are doing that. Um, Remote work, you guys seem to be kind of an early adopter of that, going way back to 2007.
Mhm.
What technologies are you guys using, and how does that all work? And
Sure. So I'll tell you, in 2007, the technology available was pretty sparse, and we used just a mashup of everything that we could get our hands on to try to tell us the story of how do we connect, how do we have a culture, how do we know if people are doing what they're supposed to do.
Mhm.
And it was terrible. That's it was using a variety of different pieces and trying to tell that story. So we actually built a lot of our own software. And so we use proprietary tools now under the Anywhere Works umbrella that allow us to chat, to collaborate, to connect on video calls through teleport. We use Setmore, which is our calendaring system. And that allows, for instance, for me to have an open calendar so that anybody in the company can schedule with me to when I have office hours. Um, video calls have been huge for us. I know over the past 2 years, folks have talked about Zoom fatigue and video call fatigue. I always kind of shake my head at that because for most of my life, I worked in offices where people could see my face all the time. And I think there's a lot of
Hmm.
value to being able to see somebody's body posture, their body language, see if they're looking kind of glum when they come in. So you could say, hey, what's going on? How's your day? I love that connection, but I think that it has to be intentional and it does need to be around connecting. If folks are in meetings that they think are useless or they think that they're on video so that someone can police them or something, then yes, absolutely, I get it. But we connect through video calls on our teleport platform all day long. And it really, sometimes it surprises me. I'll see somebody in person at a meetup. We do these periodically. Pre-pandemic, we did them a lot. And someone's like, we haven't seen each other in person for like 6 years. And I'm like, really? Because I see your face every day. That's so weird. And it doesn't take that much in person connection to kind of fill the tank for another year of virtual connection, for instance.
I think that's, when this pandemic hit, right, it kind of amplified remote work and what
Hmm.
everybody was doing and what tools they were using.
Sure.
And then there was this, oh my gosh, this is great from a corporate perspective, right? We can close all our offices, save all this money in real estate, shut everything down. You're going to be able to get office space for $1 a square foot because nobody's going to have an office. And that might have initially been the trend. And now you're seeing companies going, oh, wait a minute. People want to come together and connect. People want that human connection. And whether it's, big team conferences or team meetings, or you're
Hmm.
bringing your company together or teams together, or you have offices that are more like just becoming a hub, right? Like maybe I
Right.
don't have an office. I do have an office, but maybe, like you just have an office where people can come together and get together and work and meet and that human connection that is so personal. And so I love what you said, like 6 years, right? So one in-person meeting like carried that relationship forward for 6 years. That's just awesome.
I I think about this a lot because folks have asked, there's a lot of conversations about a return to office or what is that going to look like? And we have hub locations and we have had for a long time. And folks who are within commuting distance can rotate into offices at whatever cadence they would like. Some crave more or they're working on projects where they want to collaborate in a way. Some crave less. But I think about it, we're heading into the holiday season and
Mhm.
I think about the way it feels to connect with your family. You only have to see them, you fill in the blanks, right? How frequently you want to see your family. You love them. They're great. You appreciate what they bring to the table, literally and figuratively. But if you had to see them every day, all day long, they drive you nuts. And I think when it comes to work, I'm so glad for the time where I can be at home in my home office with the door closed and just get stuff done. And it allows me to be really excited and engaged when I do get to connect with people in 3D.
Yeah, leadership presence is something that I have a passion around, right? Because I see a lot of these leaders, and they just go meeting to meeting to meeting, event to event to event. Their whole day, their calendars are just
Mm,
insane, and they're not present, right? They'll come into
yeah.
a meeting and they're there, but they're not listening, or they're appearing to listen, but they're still processing the last meeting, or they're typing away, or they're, worst case, they're on their phones. And it's, from I'll just say it. I mean, it's just rude, right? You might as well just
Hmm.
not be there. It's probably better for your image if you weren't there. Um, like how do you as a leader, like how do you deal with that, just that like everybody wants to schedule you, and
Yeah.
if you let the reins off you'd be 7 to 7 every day totally scheduled.
So, first, I'll say that what I'm doing now is probably going to change because I could just look back through history and whatever tool or trick or calendar configuration I have continues to change and evolve. But what I had to come to terms with is that I am not at my best when I'm overscheduled. I am not at my best when I go from like what you just described, from one thing to the next thing and on and on and on. And the person who meets with me at 4 o'clock on a Friday when I've had a week like that is going to get the absolute worst version of me. And I'm more inclined to screw up, make a mistake, or not show up as the type of leader who I want to show up as. And so I had to have the discipline to arrange my calendar in a way that got me to a place where when I was connecting with people, it mattered and it was impactful. And then I blocked out time to do other work. I also am pretty vocal about meetings. I don't like meetings just for the sake. Like if it's a, hey, we're having coffee together virtually, that's one thing. But I don't like meetings about updates. Like updates, I'm like, rock on, great. I'm glad that you're doing your job and things are going swimmingly. That doesn't need to be the conversation. That's not very valuable. So I try to come with specific questions. What do I need to know about? What can I help you with? What problems are you running into? What's going unexpectedly? Or what are your big goals and how can I help you get there? Now, I have a lot of privilege in that in my role, I get to work with a lot of leaders, a lot of senior leaders. So those types of questions make sense. But in whatever fashion a day to day looks like for a leader, I think being mindful of when you're at your best and how you show up as your best consistently. I met with a coach years ago, and it's so amazing people who can just say one thing that sticks with you for a long time. And we were
Mhm.
discussing this, the time management, the busy, the overscheduled. And she asked me to envision after I get done meeting with a person and imagine it was in 3D and they are walking down the hallway from the conference room and they run into someone and that person says, "Oh, you just met with Natalie. How was that?" What do you hope that they say? And I thought about that and it changed the way I wanted to show up in meetings.
I love that, right? I mean, I think we don't think about our image enough as leaders and how we are perceived. And it's important, right? Because oftentimes that's the only touch point people have with us.
Yeah.
They don't have hours and days, they're not our spouse. They don't see us at home. They don't, you know, they get like a glimpse and people can be like, oh yeah, that person was a real bitch. Well, do you know them? Well, no, but in this meeting, they did this and they had this scowl on their face and they were
Mhm.
blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, maybe they had a bad day. Maybe something happened. Maybe something personal is
Mhm.
going on. That's the other fun, fact is leaders are human, right? Like, I had a great CIO that I worked with, and at one meeting we were talking about something that was pretty close to both of us, and she kind of broke down in tears, right, in a
Mhm.
leadership meeting of about 20-25 people. And when she left the meeting, we finished the meeting, we left, and she was like, "Oh my God, I am so sorry." And I said, "Why?" I said, "That was the most relevant, impactful, perfect, like it, not that it was faked, right? But you became human to those folks
Right.
right at that moment. And that's okay, right? It's okay to be upset, have all your host of emotions as a leader because you are. But I love what you just said about just how do you want people to leave these meetings? Because
And
sometimes
how do
that's
you
just the small glimpse they get.
yeah, and how do you want them to feel, heard, valued, putting your phone away, closing down your instant messenger, like that time is theirs. And it's small things, but again, as a leader, you don't get that many touch points. That time is really valuable and being intentional and making the most of it. And then also making sure that I've had a snack. I'm not hangry when I show up. It's like small things that can make a huge, when I catch myself and I'm like, I'm so impatient and just it's like, oh, I need to eat something actually. So how can I fuel myself so that again I could be the most effective? So that's calendar management, it's clear communication, sometimes it's being vulnerable and real. There was a meeting last week and it was unscheduled and it was important, these things happen, and I said, I need to run downstairs and grab a snack really fast. Do you care if I am finishing up eating it when we meet? Because I can squeeze you in. I've got like 15 minutes. They said, I don't care if you eat. I said, great. I grabbed, my bag of almonds. That's like my quick go-to. Ate if, and almonds are great. You only need to eat like 5 of them and you feel like a new person. And then I was in it. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that the advice that I might have given or the insight I might have shared would have been my best.
Yeah, I love that. I tell people sometimes to walk with me, right? Like
Yeah.
we often pace in our offices and stuff, and then we go into these meetings and we're forced to sit in
Mm.
this chair. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I don't think, especially if we're like visioning or ideating or thinking about new things, I need a pace, right? And if
Hmm.
we're not, I'm always like, okay, everybody walk with me. And some, it used to be hilarious. They used to call it, Michael and his ducklings, because I'd walk around, I'd walk outside the building, we'd walk around the business park and stuff. And folks were like, what are those people doing? And they're like, oh, they're in a meeting. They're walking, right? But we're ideating and we're walking. And then we'd come back and, to the conference room and put stuff up on the board and do all
Hmm.
your traditional things.
Sure.
But I love that. That's great advice just to leaders. Make sure that you're ready, right?
Yeah.
Physically, mentally.
What is our actual job? What is the actual work that we do? I'm not building a brick wall. I'm not physically answering the calls that come in. I'm not, I am showing up for leaders. And if that is the job, then me being in the right headspace makes a big difference. I also love you talking about walking meetings and doing these things. We're big on that as well. And something that I didn't expect, I knew that I liked to walk. I knew that I thought better when I moved around and when I got out of a conference room. Um, but there's also all of these unwritten rules about how you act and hierarchy when you enter a conference room. There's all
Hmm.
of these unwritten rules around etiquette and when do you speak and when do you do these things. And there's actually not very much etiquette when you're walking pretty quickly around a park. And I think that breaks people out of, oh gosh, is it my turn to talk or is this person? All of these other norms that are just built in fade away. And sometimes you get the best ideas that way.
People are on a very equal playing field when you take them out of everyone's element and do something different.
Right.
I love it. Well, we have covered a lot. We've covered definitely outsourced telecom and what that is, which is very cool. Always try to have a little geeky technology type of content, and I appreciate Natalie you sharing your journey.
Hmm.
I think you also gave us some tips. Just a reminder to be present and to show up as your best self, and to go in thinking, what do I want them to leave with? Kind of the end in mind, but from a more interpersonal perspective. That's just so powerful. Um, Thank you for taking the time for sharing your journey and for leaving us with those words of wisdom. It's awesome.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. I love everything we got to talk about, and I feel like we could probably talk for a lot longer.
We can keep going for sure. Awesome. Thank you.